Hi, my name is Jenna and today I'm here to talk about one of my favorite things ever, villains. I love bad guys. I think you guys know this about me. I am definitely the kind of girl who prefers a villain over a protagonist. One of my favorite possessions I have is literally a bookmark that says, I believe in heroes, but I prefer villains, because that is completely true. And there are particular villains in particular pieces of media that I would probably do anything they asked of me, regardless of what it was, because I just love them so much. Particularly when it comes to like swoon-worthy villains. If a swoon-worthy villain entered my life and was like, I'm a bad guy, do you want to join me? I'd sit here and go, yeah, okay, why not? I'd love to. Does that make me like slightly afraid for my own sanity? Yes it does, just a little bit. Does that bother me? Doesn't bother me as much as it probably should. So anyway, here are 8 villains that I would probably do anything for. Just a little bit of a disclaimer, some of these villains could be considered to be spoilers because we either don't know they're villains at the start of the story or just what they do is a spoiler. So I will start off by holding up the book. If you haven't read it and you don't want to be spoiled, then I recommend muting until I put the book down. But basically, here are 8 villains that I just love. So the first villain I'm going to talk about is one that everyone should guess, and that's why I'm starting with him, and that is Sebastian Morgenstern from the Mortal Instruments series. It's no secret how much I love Sebastian Morgenstern, and that's because I talk about him to every time I do a book tag, and it's like, name a villain you shouldn't love but do, and every time without fail I'm like, Sebastian Morgenstern. Love the guy. I know that Sebastian has done some really terrible things. Like, he is not a good person. He's really horrible. However, I just have a complete soft spot for him, and I think that stems from the fact that his dad was the worst. His mother, who, you know, his real mother, thought he was dead, so he didn't really get that loving maternal instinct. Instead, the woman who raised him was like the literal mother of demons. That's a yikes for him. He was literally fed like demon blood in the womb, so the poor guy, he never stood a chance. From beginning of his life to the end, he was always going to be a villain, and I think that's horrible. You know, his life was basically set up for him to be a villain, and I hate that, but I also love him for it. One of his biggest motivations in this book series is he just wants a family to love him, and that's why he's so desperate to get to know Clare and to have her love him, because he just craves that familial love that he never got. And like, I know he went about it in a really bad way, but the motivation behind a lot of what he did is kind of what makes me love him. I don't know if it's the fact that Cassandra Clare wrote him as this really complex, beautiful character, or if when I first met him in the TV show he looked like this that makes me love him so much. But like, one way or another, I really do love Sebastian Morgenstern, and if he approached me and was like, I need you to help me do bad things, I would immediately drop everything and be like, okay, let's do it. The second villain that I'm going to be talking about is one from the Whisper Weapon duology. So if you have not read this duology and you don't want to be spoiled, definitely mute this video, because what I'm going to be talking about is a massive spoiler for the end of the second book. Okay, is everybody gone who wants to read the duology? Okay, so I'm talking about Kale from the Whisper Weapon duology by Lynette and Noni. We don't find out that Kale is a bad guy until the end of the second book, but like, hear me out. He and Alyssa should have gotten together at the end of the series, which is kind of hard because he is a bad guy, but I think he and Alyssa should have gotten together at the end of this duology. So Alyssa is our main character, and she ends up getting with this other boy, and she in the first book is in this complete love triangle, and again in the second one, love triangle, until Kale reveals himself to be a villain, and at the end it's like, oh, okay, I'll have to be with the other guy. So yes, Kale ends up being a really horrible person, and yes, he tries to kill Alyssa and most of her friends, but again, it's the motivation behind his becoming a villain that is something so intriguing to me. One of the things I would have loved to have seen from this duology, and something I would love to see more of in books in general, is I would have loved to have seen Alyssa struggling a little bit more with her feelings towards Kale when it is revealed that he is a villain. For her, it's basically immediately, it's almost an immediate switch, like, oh, he's a bad guy, clearly I can't love him, I have to be with Ward instead. head, and I just don't think that's how feelings work. Absolutely, when Alyssa found out Kale was a bad guy, she immediately would be like, oh, okay, yeah, he's really bad, he's done some terrible things, I have to start thinking a lot more about my feelings for him because I can't feel that way about him anymore. But a part of her will always be like, well, I did feel that though, why is that? And I think that's something that would have been really interesting to explore, and I would have kind of loved it if Alyssa had given into her feelings with Kale and he had started teaching her some really bad things, and then she sort of realizes as he's doing it that, oh no, this is actually really bad, I do need to break away and to break free and all this sort of stuff. So I think that it was a bit of a missed opportunity really to not have that side of their relationship explored a little bit more. That's the sort of story that I would have liked to have read, and I think that it's something that we don't see a lot of in YA fiction or any sort of fiction really, and it's something I think we should. Also, Kale at least has a personality. Ward has the personality of a sack of potatoes. He is just the worst, and I don't like him very much. Next up, we have another relatively spoilery-ish villain, and that is Aven from the Madoran Chronicles by Lynette and Noni. In particular, if you have not read Draekora and you are wanting to read the series and don't want to be spoiled, then I recommend muting this video until I pop this book down. Aven is an interesting character because when we first meet him, he's a lot older and he's terrible and he's a really bad person. And I mean, it says a lot about Lynette and Noni that she is able to write really complex, really fantastic villains, because I fall for them literally every time, and Aven was no exception. But I didn't fall for Aven until Draekora. In this particular book, Alex goes back in time and hangs with the Mayarans, and that includes Aven. So when I first read this book, I dubbed him Baby Aven because we were seeing him before he is the Aven that we know as the villain from the original 2 books. And in this book, we dive really deep into Aven's psyche. We are made to love him. We're made to see that he's not really that bad of a guy, and we form a friendship with him, and it's a whole thing that really just made me so conflicted, because then when we jump out of this book and get into further ones and find out what he's been doing, you're then having to like reconcile this memory you have of this particular character, this baby Aven character, with the Aven that you know in the future who's doing really horrible, terrible stuff. There was something so sweet and innocent about his curiosity in this book that just made me fall hard for him, and even in the future when he's doing some really horrific stuff, even then I'm sort of like, yeah, I mean, I can see why he takes that leap into being villain. I can see why he does these terrible, terrible things. Doesn't make them right. I can just understand why he does them, and I do think that he probably wouldn't need the whole like mind control thing to ask me to do things for him, which is awful, but still true. Next up, we have my OG bad boy obsession, and that is Draco Malfoy from the Harry Potter series. Draco is not someone who like gets a redemption arc. He's not somebody that you're meant to love. He's just a really bratty, horrible teenager who does really shitty stuff to Harry. And yet, I love him. I think a lot of the times he is just a victim of the way he has been brought up. He's been brought up by his terrible parents. He's been brought up in this household that does worship the Dark Lord and all of this sort of stuff. So I feel a lot of his personality is a lot of the like nature versus nurture kind of situation, in that he is brought up in this environment and it's very, very hard for him to break away from that. And I think especially when we get to Deathly Hallows, and well, especially when we get to Half-Blood Prince and we sort of see a little bit more about him and the choices that he's having to make, and we realize that he's still horrible and what he does to Harry is still really, really not okay. But I feel like you start to get more of an idea as to why he does what he does and why he feels the way that he feels. Definitely the events of Half-Blood Prince really sort of show that he can't get out from under his parents' influence, and sort of just go to show that a lot of his parents' ideals and what they believe in is really rubbing off on him, and I think that it makes it really hard for him to form his own opinion. I feel like if you could get him away from his parents for any length of time, he would really start to open up and realize that he was wrong and they are wrong, and I love that about him, and I just love him and absolutely would do bad things with him 100%. Next up, we have Loki from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and is there a person alive who doesn't like Loki? Like, if you're one of these people who doesn't like Loki, please let me know in the comment section below and explain to me why you don't like him, because I love him. But I'm not just talking about the Loki once he goes through his redemption arc, which obviously starts in, I think that one starts in Dark World and ends in Infinity War. No, I'm talking about the entirety of Loki. I'm talking about even him as his original trickster god, where he's not even doing things that are really particularly bad. He's just doing things that are chaotic and fantastic. And that's something that I love about him. I love the chaoticness of his magic and who he is as a person. He's full of chaos, and something like that is fantastic. I'm so excited for the Loki TV show because we're really going to get to see that chaos on full display, and that's something that I absolutely cannot wait to see. I would love nothing more than to travel the galaxy with Loki and to create chaos with him. I think that would be so much fun. They'd wreak havoc everywhere we went. It would just be magnifique. Next up, we have Kylo Ren from the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Once again, not just talking about when he goes through his redemption arc. I'm talking about Kylo Ren at the peak of his chaotic rule. He is another one that I would love to make chaos with. He's another one who I think is really struggling, obviously, with who he is as a person. He's trying to balance himself. He's trying to come to terms with the fact that, like, he's really not a terrible person. He's just making really bad choices and has really bad influences. And that's a real theme, I think, here with a lot of the characters and a lot of the villains that I love, is just they have bad influences and it's made them make bad choices. But Kylo Ren in particular is one that I would love to create chaos with, and I think that if you got him, we've proved in the sequel trilogy that if you get him away from those bad influences, he is still chaotic, but in a less bad way. Then I've also got Grindelwald from the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them series, and of all of the ones on this list, I think Grindelwald is probably the one that needs the most explaining. When we first met Percival Graves in the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them film, I fell in love with him. I don't know if it's because Colin Farrell was the one playing him, or if it's just because he was playing such a unique and charismatic character, and that's a big theme here with Grindelwald, is he's very charismatic, he's very well spoken. I don't know if it was like a combination of the two, or if it's just the fact that it was Colin Farrell playing him, but I fell in love with Percival Graves. And then of course, the Grindelwald reveal. And if we're talking about villains, like Swoon-Worthy villains I'd want to do bad things to, then obviously I'm talking about the Jamie Campbell-Bower version of Grindelwald. But if we're talking about villains I want to do bad things with, then I'm talking about the Johnny Depp one. And that's because he is so well-spoken and so charismatic. He's probably the opposite of a lot of the characters on this list, in that while people like Loki and Kylo Ren, they're all about chaos, they're all about big things, Grindelwald is more of the quiet antagonist, in that he has very big plans, but the plans that he has are the way he goes about doing them is quite subtle. I think the biggest tell in that is in the second film, the big speech that he does, the big rousing speech to all of his followers, is so charismatic and persuasive that it's very hard not to believe what he's saying. It's very hard you have to really, really think hard to go, no, he's wrong, he's bad. And I think that's something that I love. I love villains that are very clever in that way. And that's one of the reasons why I think this one's not so much a like conscious choice. Like all of these villains, I consciously would be like, yes, I love you, let's do this. Whereas Grindelwald, I think, is going to be more of a subconscious decision, in that I think if I was in that situation and I heard his speeches and if I heard his persuasive charisma, I really do think I would turn to his side. And I actually have an 8th villain on this list, and that is the Darkling from the Shadow and Bone series by Leigh Bardugo. I have not read the Shadow and Bone series by Leigh Bardugo. I think it's the Grishaverse. Haven't read it. Know nothing about it. But I do know Ben Barnes is playing him in the TV show, and I just have this feeling that I'm going to love him. I just have this feeling, like, even just the little bits and pieces we've seen from the teaser trailer, I just get this feeling that he is going to be someone that I'm going to love. And I don't know if it's because it's Ben Barnes playing him. It's probably a little bit because it's Ben Barnes playing him, but also I don't know why he's such a bad character. I don't know what he does to be so bad, but I'm really, really excited to find out. And I'm excited to find out where I fall on the do I love him, do I not? But I'm expecting to fall on the I love him bandwagon. And there you go. That is my villains that I would do pretty much anything for. All in all, I think it's pretty safe to say that you should be truly worried about my sanity. Villains are my absolute favorite, and I think in order for me to really love a story, I have to really love the villain. And one of the key things about the majority of these characters, all of them have the same sort of backstory. They have that tragic backstory, you know, they're orphans or something terrible happened to their parents or they've had really bad influences growing up. And I think that in particular is clearly that's my thing. That's what I like to see. I like characters who have those issues, apparently. I don't know what that says about me. Probably not good things, but like, yeah, we're gonna go with it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section below any of the villains that you would probably do anything for, because I absolutely would love to know. If you like this video, be sure to give it a huge thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a thing. Stay random. Bye.